So here we are with Iain again, and we're happy to have you. Thank you so much for being my guest again.
Always my
Yeah,
pleasure. Always fun to be with you.
it is 30 years, 35 years or so of friendship, and we've done a lot together. But one of the things we share is love of art and travel. And the book that I picked up while I was traveling in Italy a few years ago was called The Art of Travel. And here's the book. Um, and I'm just crazy about it. And I've shared it with a lot of friends. It's written by Alain de Botton. And he's the author of this book and many other books. It's a little bit philosophical, but it's fun. What did you think, Iain?
I agree with you. It's a deep book. I did a little research on it. He also has some TED Talks, which are interesting.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And he's a Swiss, born from Switzerland. He is a philosopher, and he lives now in Oxford, and I think teaches there as well. But he talks about a lot of different subjects. He has a book on love and other things as well. But yeah, the art of travel and looking at it from a deeper, more philosophical trajectory, I thought was fascinating.
Yeah, I thought it was too, and he throws in enough humor. I mean, it's a fairly easy read because it's broken into some, some nice sections and departures and motives and, landscapes and art and return. And we're going to talk about those today. He tells you, he says we often know where we're going to go, but we don't know why or how or any of those kinds of things. So let's talk about why. A lot of people I know do not understand why I love to travel. I mean, I have got to be in my car doing something all the time. And but I found that I have traveled for different reasons. After reading some of this book, I started looking at that and I'm like, why do I travel? But it's been different reasons for different times in my life. How about you? You had a long history of travel.
I have. You made me think about that we talked earlier about doing this. The first trip I ever took across the Atlantic was when I was 2 years old. And I have, of course, no memories of that except for one. And that was being at the bedside of my grandfather who was incapacitated in Glasgow. That's my first memory,
Oh
2 years old. And I'm sure there were lots of other wonderful things happened on that trip, but I don't remember that at all. But when I was 8 years old, my father got a home leave. We were living in New York at the time, and he had some business to do in Europe. And so he was off at business meetings, and my mother and sister and I played tourist, and we visited 6 countries in Europe at age 8.
Wow.
And I have very, very clear memories of that. And then, of course, the big change, as you know, for me was when I was 14, my father came home one day and said, we're moving to India. And for the next 3 years, I lived in India from the ages of 14 to 17. This is 1959 through 62. So obviously a very formative period for me. So certainly for that period, the reason I traveled was I was going along. I was accompanying my family. After that, I had a business career. I worked in the government and dealt with trade issues, and that got me all over the world. And that's a different kind of travel. You sort of fly into a strange city, you go to a hotel, you go to a conference room, you go to a business lunch. If you're lucky, and I usually was, I would grab an extra day and play tourist, and then fly home. But it's a different kind of travel. Now that I have time, the travel is quite different, and this becomes much more of an adventure and an education and a much slower pace, where you can actually get involved and learn about a place. And that's what I really enjoy now.
So you had 3 real different reasons for travel.
Exactly.
One following your family, the second was for business, and the third is for exploration with Anne and your
Indeed.
and your friends. Yeah, yeah.
Indeed.
So he says one of the things I love that he said is that sometimes we're curious and we seek the exotic. he says the exotic, which promises to an escape from drudgery of home, draws us to travel. That's interesting. I never really thought about home as being drudgery, but maybe work might have been drudgery, you know?
I think that I agree with him on that. One of the reasons for travel is to escape the routine. And I mean, we all take an annual vacation when we're working, you know, to go to the beach, get out of the daily
Yeah.
pace of things. And so certainly there's a big impetus to get out of your comfort zone and go someplace. But I think the other half of that and the attraction of the exotic is it really makes you see things differently. And it really changes your perspective. And I think ultimately it changes you as well. And I think that's one of the reasons we go.
Yeah, yeah, but we don't know that until after. And you know, we're going to talk a little bit about that as we go on today. But yeah, sometimes you don't. It's not the reason you go, but you understand that more when you come back. You're changed. You're absolutely changed.
I think that's right. But I think the more you travel, I think that
Right.
becomes
Yeah.
part of the expectations.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you realize how important that trip to India was. And so when you're heading off to Vietnam or someplace, you have expectations that this is going to be important,
Right.
and you go with your eyes open. Then you know
Yeah.
you're looking for those kind of opportunities.
Yeah, he brings you know, throughout this book he brings writers and authors, and in this section he brings the author Flaubert in, and he talks about his time in Egypt, which he just goes on and on about, if you recall. And one of the things that he talks about are those camels, and how they struck him. Um, they moved him, and you and I have been on those camels. Pardon me. And so we know, but you know, there's other parts of Morocco and the world that I find equally as exotic as that was. But I was impressed by that, you know.
There's an interesting story about the camel, which I've always found very intriguing. You know how the camel moves and has his head up and his nose in the air as he's walking along. And the reason for that supposedly is that in Islam, there are 99 words for God, and the camel knows the 100th. But yes, you know, traveling to a place like Morocco is just, I mean, talk about eye-opening. It's eye-opening, it's ear-opening, it's nose-opening. It's your whole senses just pop alive. And
Every one of them.
everyone, I mean, that's one of the things I find so exciting about going to a place like that.
Yeah, we found that in Vietnam. We found that in Turkey. You know, and so yeah, I'm attracted to that too. A lot of people ask me, well, what's your favorite place to go? Well, you know, I mean, home is Italy for me. I feel most comfortable there. But I think my favorites are Morocco, Vietnam, and Turkey, you know, because of those fabulous exotic experiences. He
Well, it really takes you out of your it really takes you out of your comfort zone, and I think makes you see yourself and see the world differently. And if you're lucky, you're going to bring that home with you.
Yeah,
I think. Yeah.
for sure, for sure. He uses these writers and authors, as I was mentioning a few minutes ago, Wordsworth and Van Gogh and Hopper and Ruskin, and he makes his point in the book through these artists. But today our messaging comes from Facebook and Instagram and the iPhone and all of our photographs. Do you think that the way we receive information is more or less helpful with the way we're getting things? I mean, are we still intrigued, just as intrigued, or maybe more?
I think it's they say your strengths are your weaknesses. And I think the strengths of some of these things are also their weaknesses. So for example, I mean, it's very nice to be in a strange city and be able to Google something rather than having to lug around a travel guide, you used to do, or, to pull up a map to find out where you are. So in that way, they can be quite useful, I think, and helpful to exploration and travel. On the other hand, I always said, you have never been to Venice unless you've lost.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of places like that, that when you get lost, the magic starts happening. Serendipity comes up. You find that little restaurant that you could never find again.
And you think you're the only one who ever found it.
That too. But you have the meal of a lifetime, and the next day you say, "Come with me. We're going to go back to this place," and you have no idea where it is. You can't find it. So it's almost like Brigadoon. It like appeared and then it disappeared. But if you have Google Maps,
you can find it again. Yeah.
The other thing that happens is when you get lost or disoriented in a place, you suddenly rely on the kindness of strangers. And, approaching someone and saying, I don't know where I am, can you help me out? That has ended up in having a drink. It's ended up in meals together. It's ended up in just all kinds of serendipity adventures that happen that I think happen less now.
I think you're right. And I know that a lot of people are afraid of being lost. They don't want the unknown because they haven't had that experience of finding that magical spot. Venice, their whole job is to get you lost. That's their mission statement on their website.
Yeah. Come to Venice to get lost. Yeah.
You have to. But yeah, I'm with you. I feel like the iPhone, we're now able to take some fabulous photographs. We can take a picture of a map. Somebody says there's just so many wonderful ways to use that. But the written word is, and he talks about that a little bit, is that it's painted. It's like painting a picture with words when you're actually reading. When we read Flaubert's discussion or not discussion, but revealing how he was feeling about Egypt, it was much more than us just seeing it ourselves. It was just what he's. So I do feel that the written word is powerful in a way.
Definitely. The other big drawback that I see in the access to technology now is when you're in a place, you can instantly turn on your iPhone and be on Facebook or something like that, and you're taken out of where you are.
Yeah.
I can remember as a young man when I was in India, taking a few trips with a friend when I was 16, and we went off for a week or so. And, I would wave goodbye to my parents and say, see you in a week. I had no way to contact them.
Wow.
Yeah. And they had no way to contact me. Now, if there had been an emergency, it would have been nice to have an iPhone, but boy, was that, fascinating.
Yeah.
And I think the benefits of that so outweigh being able to check your emails.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, exactly. He moves on to talk about in travel that beauty and he seeks beauty. This is the author who's doing this, and he takes a trip to Provence, and he says this wonderful line which touched my heart: "Delight and enliven me." He challenged the olive trees, the cypress, and the skies to delight and enliven him. And what he found was Van Gogh. And we know that he was a master at that. Oh, well.
Off your time.
Starry Night, and to be able to say that's another reason to go. I think people go to Ireland for those kinds of things. Do you think that Van Gogh and some of these artists shape or help us to decide where we're going to go?
Oh, that's an interesting point. I thought you were going someplace else to say, do you think they help us see? other places, and I think they do, because you begin to see things go through their eyes.
Yeah.
But I think certainly, I mean, not only to see places that they've painted or written about, and to get your own experience based on that, but also to visit where they were, and just to pay a homage to them almost.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you planned a nice, beautiful long weekend for Anne and I in Amsterdam when we were on our way to Africa, and one of the things high on our list was to go see the Van Gogh Museum, which had just been reopened.
Just opened, yeah.
And so we did, and that was one, we wanted to see all those beautiful paintings, but it was also to pay respects to this Dutch painter,
right?
Even
right.
though, and we were so fortunate that day. Just as an aside, you had gotten us tickets weeks and weeks in advance, and the day we got there was the day they unveiled the new Van Gogh they had found. That was the first one in 120 years. and we just walked up, and there it was on the wall, and there was no one else around. It was really just a magical moment.
It's magic. It really is. I think about other artists. I think about, even Renoir and the ballet dancers and the Chagall, and there's just so many, and the writers too. I think we look at those paintings and we say, oh, I must see that. I must feel that. And so that's a wonderful experience. But de Botton also goes on to say, and he talks a little bit about possessing art or possessing the beauty. And I thought about that. He said that there's an urge to say, I was there, I saw this, and it mattered. And I think that's what you guys were feeling in Amsterdam. I found that when I was thinking about that line, possessing beauty, I didn't realize I was doing this until recently, but I bring something back that's beautiful from everywhere I've gone. I used to bring a lot of trinket stuff, but now I bring one piece back, and it's an important piece, like that beautiful painting in Cuba. And so the beauty, by possessing beauty or bringing it back with me, sort of extends my life, my trip there, and my memories. And I know you guys are similar, but maybe not quite so much. But I think possessing beauty is interesting. I would never have thought about that in terms of travel.
It struck me as a strange phrase. I thought it was kind of like how do you possess a moonbeam and things like that.
Yeah, right.
You really don't do that, but you can certainly have a remembrance of it. And if you're fortunate, when something strikes you in that kind of a fashion that is so beautiful, that it changes you. And that's perhaps the way that you can best possess it, is that if it's opened your eyes and somehow changed the way you see the world.
Yeah. I think that certainly has been true for me. But I've also been able to do that, and you have too, with your children. And this is such an education. I mean, we're changed, but if we can do that at an earlier age, well, you had a great, you had a great life of being able to travel young when you were young, but traveling, giving that experience to your kids or to your grandchildren is just, to me, it's just the thing to do right now.
Yeah, well, you're very good at that. I know you've taken all your grandchildren individually on trips. We've managed to take our both our daughter and our son on trips, and we've taken the grandchildren to Maui and things like that. But there's a whole world out there. But it seems people get so overscheduled these days. It's hard to fit everything in.
I know, and it gets harder.
Yeah.
You really have to take them when they're young, because once they're teenagers, they've got,
stuff to do.
We will just leave it there.
Yes, indeed.
But he goes on. Let's move on to anticipation, because I think
Sure.
that's a really fun part.
Mhm.
Um, de Botton says dreams of travel are often quite different from the actual trips, in part because you can't travel away away from yourself. So is it more fun to plan a trip or anticipate the trip? And what about traveling away from yourself? That goes back to the reason you travel.
Well, I don't, I think wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
So if you're the kind of person that worries about everything, there you are. If you're kind of the person that's open to all sorts of adventures, there you are. So I agree with that, but that's important. I think there really is, for me, there isn't a better, is the anticipation better than the actual trip? To me, they're different experiences, and I think they're both have great value and excitement. I mean, especially when we've traveled by ourselves or with another couple, we sort of plan out the routes and, where we want to go. We have discussions about it, and we get out the guidebooks and we check Google, and, we do a lot of investigations about where we're going to go. And then there's this, there's this phrase that the military use about planning for a battle. And it's, after the first shot, all the plans go out the window. And so there's nothing like having all these wonderful plans and then arriving at a place to find that your hotel doesn't have your reservation, or you've missed your flight or something, and suddenly you're on your own. And I find that very exciting, actually. And that's some
Really?
of the, yes, I mean, some of the best things that we've had happen, is just, we can't stay there, so we go someplace else, and it turns out to be so much better than what we had planned for. Not always, not always, but and even the ones that go south make really great stories afterwards.
Well, those are the things we talk about. Are the things that didn't quite go right. But yeah, I don't know. I do so much designing and planning that I've fallen into this horrible rut right now of, if I plan a trip to Napa and I haven't been to Napa, I need to go to Napa. And so now I'm going to Napa. And the same thing I've designed 2 trips to Northern California, 3 actually, of different routes and ways. And so my son is turning 50 this year, and I said, where do you want to go? And he said, California. I'm like, good, I'm in, because, so the anticipation has had a kind of a different effect on me, but it's fascinating to think about. I don't know if you can recall there's a couple of stories he starts the book with on anticipation, and I don't know if you want to share those or if you remember what I'm talking about.
You'll have to refresh my memory.
Okay, let me refresh your memory. So I don't know, the guy is in Paris, and he's made this big effort. He's decided that he's going to go to London.
Right,
Do you remember this story?
And then he never goes. Is that right?
Yeah, but the reason, so the way de Botton writes it is he's laborious. He takes out his shoes. They're all polished. He's got the valise is all laid out. He's, everything is, he gets the driver. He goes, and he's got some time to wait. So he decides that he'll stop at a English pub to get the experience.
Right.
And so to get ready for his trip to London. And he does all of that. And he imagines it. And by the end of his lunch, he's like, why go?
Done that. Yeah.
I thought that was just, so I haven't experienced that with travel, but I have experienced it with big projects. I'll think it through, and I'll go, nah.
Yeah. Well, as I say, if I plan a trip, I'm probably going on it. But I do think that the planning and the execution are different things. And they both have, just like the person you described now, all his efforts were, that's all he needed. I mean, I think it can be quite wonderful, but I think when you get on the ground, it becomes something different. And that can be quite wonderful too.
Well, he wasn't willing.
No, he was not.
The other story is of de Botton himself, and he goes to Barbados, but it all starts with a brochure.
Yes.
And so he plans and thinks, and he anticipates this whole trip to Barbados. And I'm trying to remember what that line was. He says that oh, I'm embarrassing myself right now. That's okay. He says that he returned to London from Barbados to find that the city had stubbornly refused to change. That's a little bit different. He anticipated that when he would leave London, when he came back, it would be different. But he also and I can't find my notes on
Well,
that.
let me talk about that first point, because I found that really interesting. Because one of the quotations that I like, which is quite different, is the one from, I'm going to read it for you too, is the one from T.S. Eliot.
Okay.
In his poem Little Gidding, where he talks about travel.
Okay.
And he says, we shall not cease from exploration, and at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time.
How interesting.
And I think that's the view that I would take of travel. I wouldn't say, well, I'm back and here it is, all same old, same old. I think if you've really traveled, you're going to come back a different person with different eyes, and you're going to see the place for the first time.
Right. Can you read that one more time?
Sure. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and to know the place for the first time.
Yeah, I really like that. Wow. So we've talked a little bit about anticipation. We've talked about planning. We've talked about why you go. And let's talk about now where you go, and the kind of travel one takes, where they either want to be in solitude, to go to the quiet place where they can rest and regroup and recuperate, perhaps, or to an active place. He talks about this in two different ways. He talks about this solitude versus being with the community. He also talks about it in terms of city versus country. How do you see those kinds of travel being different, or do you find yourself a magnet to one or the other of those?
I'd have to say that all of the above. It sort of depends upon my mood at the time, and it wouldn't be unusual for me. But the way I like to travel is to go to a country or someplace for 3 or 4 weeks, and to try to stay in a particular city or area for a week or so. And that can involve a country setting or a city setting. I think for me, they both provide different things that at different times I need and or want. So I don't really see, I don't have necessarily a preference for doing one versus the other. I do see a distinction though, and I would use the words a distinction between tourists and travelers. And tourists to me, and I've been a tourist at times, have a bucket list. I'm going to see the Eiffel Tower. I'm going to see the Taj Mahal. I'm going to see, the Big Ben, and got my picture. Move on to the next one. And I think travelers do something much more profound in that they really do get into these questions of why. why is this way? Why did they build it that way? Why does it look this way? Why does it taste this way? And I think it becomes a more enriching experience, but it also takes more time. It takes more time and it takes more consideration.
Well, when you slow down, you have the opportunity. You don't, the slower you go, the more you see, the more the more you think. And it often for me doesn't happen. It takes me those 3 weeks or those 2 weeks, because when you leave, you're still jitzed from, all the anticipation, not the anticipation, but the preparation of getting ready, getting on. What did I forget? Who should I have called? And it takes a while for me to settle down, and then the curiosity starts kicking in, and then you ponder things. You have time to ponder, and the fewer people, sorry to say this, but the fewer people you're with, the more ponder time you have.
Sure.
um, if it's filled with conversation, then you don't really say, what is that window, why did they put that window there?
Yeah.
um, or as you said, there's just different experiences for different times in your life, or different points in your, maybe even in the same trip. you
Right.
know you could
Well,
go
I want to give you a plug. I know you're not doing as many of the group travel as you used to do, but one of the great things about, and I think probably the trips you design as well, Freedom Travel, was that it wasn't a tourist trip; it was a traveler's trip. And if you went to Italy, as we did, you'd go to Florence, you would get a hotel, and you'd stay there for a week,
yeah,
and maybe take little side trips during the course of the day. And some of those you arranged. There'd be a schedule of things to do, but often it was Thursday. That's yours. Have fun, and you're on your own. And if you needed to get away from the other travelers, if you needed to go sit in a park, if you needed to go to a museum, go get it. And I thought that was almost the perfect model for
thank you,
travel.
thank you. It came by accident. I found that, you know everybody comes. I learned this on our trip to paint Portugal. We all went to paint Portugal, and everyone came in the first trip with their easels and their paints and their hats. They were all ready to go out and paint, until they saw the first cathedral, until they saw that there was something else, or until they got into their book and they said, oh, it turned out no one painted, or few people painted. It's like, well, I can do that when I get home. So I realized that some people wanted to paint. Some people wanted to nightlife. Some people wanted to just see every monument that there was. And if you didn't build in time to do that, they were not going to go home happy.
Right.
And the idea is you go home happy and you go home rested.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Tired travelers are cranky travelers. And that's
Indeed.
no fun for me or for you.
Yeah. And I think the other thing is I always find when I travel that the first day is an adjustment. I mean, I'm the kind of person that likes to get someplace, unpack my bag,
Yep.
put things away. I want to find out where I'm going to get my morning coffee. I got
What
things to
the
figure
ATM
out.
is. Right.
And if we're getting on the bus the next day, I got to do it all again.
I know.
Whereas if we're going to stay there a week, by the third day at 7 o'clock in the morning, I'm standing in front of the coffee shop as he opens the door, and I'm greeted by a big smile and the coffee the way I like it made,
Exactly.
And that's very special.
Well, I have such fond memories. I know we're moving off the book a little bit, but I have such fond memories of us being in Portugal, and you and I were the only ones who were up early, and we would go out for our bica,
Right.
and we knew where we had a route,
Mm-hmm.
and we knew who was going to be open at 7 o'clock.
We sure did. We sure did. We were the first ones there.
We were the first ones there all the time.
Yeah.
So it's I think traveling is just a magical experience for those who are willing and daring in a way in the beginning, and curious. This the the slower you do things, the more you get out of it. And I think when de Botton introduces John Ruskin, the writer, I mean the author and the artist, he talks a lot about drawing. And this man, and you'll see in the book, is detailed. I mean, he's drawing fauna and flower and all of this in such great detail. The reason is because he sees it. And I think he said, and I believe this to be true, that when you draw something, you see it. I think that was very true for me when I was painting landscapes. I could
Mhm.
paint that landscape in Portugal from memory because I know it so well. And you've been able to see things through your camera's eye as well.
Right, but that's true, and it forces you to focus. You have to look at the light. You have to look at the composition. Um, but I really enjoyed Ruskin's description of word pictures,
Yes.
which was his other way of capturing something, was
Yeah.
to actually write down very carefully everything he was seeing or hearing or feeling or tasting, and to draw a whole picture of a moment.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that just forces you to stop, concentrate, and really see.
Yeah.
And so I think either both drawing, writing, anything that makes you take a moment and just really look at what's in front of you, I think is important.
One time, my son was going to go to on a internship in Alaska, and he said, asked my permission, and of course I gave it. I said, but there's only one thing. I don't want you to fly. I want you to drive, because I want you to take the time to see the country slowly. I don't want you to be in Virginia and then be in Alaska. I want you to get to Alaska. I want you to experience that. And, you know, he talks in this book a little bit about modes of transportation, and I don't think we need to dig too deep in, but train, the drive, walking, you know, all of those things allow you, and I wouldn't say force you, but allow you to see and feel all the things we've already talked about 2 or 3 times in this conversation. But I think slowing down. Um, so what about when you come home? How does that feel? What's the takeaway? You've already said that it changes you. Um, how do we, I have a list of all the places I've been. You know, I mean, is this is it a documentary of life, or, you know, what does coming home from the trip mean to one?
Well, I think a documentary of life, but I think it is your life. And I think I believe you bring all those places back with you. And you'll stumble on them all the time when you get up in the morning and you see a sunrise, and it'll remind you of the sunrise over Victoria Falls, because the mist is sort of the same way. And you will see that sunrise because you saw the sunrise at Victoria Falls. You'll see it in a different way.
Mhm,
You'll bring back, one of the things we bring back is food.
mhm.
After we went to Vietnam, you know, we were so taken with the food there, with its freshness and its beauty,
Yeah,
that it changed the way we prepare food and what we eat.
yeah,
So I think you bring all these little things back into your life, and it's part of who you become.
yeah,
And that's why I think travel is so important. And you know, I don't want to get into a political discussion here, but I think one of the things that we suffer from in this country is we tend to see different people as being other and being distinct from us. But you know, if you spend 2 weeks in Morocco, you're never going to see Arab people or Berbers as different again.
yeah,
You know, it's just not going to happen. Or if you go to Vietnam, you're not going to see Asian Americans as different. You're going to see them as people
people,
that that you
right.
enjoyed. So I think travel is so important from that aspect, and I think we all benefit
Yeah.
from those experiences.
I could not agree more. I think this is a great book to consider. I'm going to put all the information in the story notes. It's called The Art of Travel. And you can see that that's filled with pictures and my notes and all kinds of fun stuff. Um, I highly recommend it. I hope you have a friend like I do to talk with about it and discuss with about it. Um, and I thank you, Iain, so much for being my guest.
And I thank you for being my friend. And I always enjoy talking with you.
Okay, let's do it again.
You got it. Okay.
Bye.